Pick your poison. Pick, is it cyanide, or is it hemlock? Which kills faster? Which is more deadly? So I think this issue of a democratic media is very important. Here in Eugene, the Community Media Alliance, people working on this issue are trying to create alternatives. And so it is important. Please support alternative radio. There's some books here tonight, and I can tell you more about that later. Excuse me. Now, the media also are complicit in the military-industrial complex. In fact, when Eisenhower actually wrote that speech, the first draft had military-industrial congressional complex. Did you know that? But his aides told him, listen, Ike, that was his nickname, you better not put congressional. You got a lot of friends in the Senate and the House, and they're going to be really offended. So it was deleted from the final speech, but it's in there in the draft. And today I would just add media educational complex as well to the military-industrial media educational complex. All of those factors have certainly formed and manipulated the public mind. The control of language has been recognized by propagandists from ancient times to being absolutely central to formulating popular opinion. So, like Orwell, over and over again in Animal Farm, 2 legs bad, 4 legs good. 2 legs bad, 4 legs good. Pretty soon, you are convinced, humans bad, animals good. Propagandists, crude propagandists, like Hitler and Goebbels. Hitler said, with constant repetition, I can convince people that heaven is hell and hell is heaven. And Goebbels, his propaganda minister, said, and I too can do it. With constant repetition, I can convince the German people that a square is a circle and a circle is a square. These are only words. And we can control the public mind. In fact, that is a term in a liberal media philosophy first enunciated by Edward Bernays in the 1920s, who wrote a book called Propaganda. He was an American Madison Avenue executive, advertising executive, who worked for Woodrow Wilson's propaganda committee during World War I to convince the American people that they needed to join the war against Europe, even though Wilson had been elected the year before on keeping America out of World War I. Journalists used to have a motto, a kind of animating vision of comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Yeah. Some of you have heard this. Well, now it's just been, tossed on its head. Now they're into comforting the comfortable and afflicting the afflicted. There used to be a time, and I did a program recently with Daniel Shore, who died earlier this year. He told me when he got a job in the 1930s, he was making $25 a week. And that was good money. He was glad to get $25 a week. Today, these gas bags, people like Juan Williams, who leaves NPR and then joins Fox News, he's getting $2 million. He just signed a contract for $2 million. All of them are making millions and millions of dollars. Then they're selling their books, through their right-wing networks, making more millions of dollars from that. So in terms of class, something very radical has happened. Before, journalists came from the working class. Now they are part of the ruling class, economically as well as ideologically. That inhibits them from reporting from, if I may say, our perspective, from our point of view, from the downtrodden, from the have-nots. I'm not interested in, what's happening to the haves so much. I want to know what's happening with the have-nots and why is there such a huge wealth and income gap in the United States. This is a class issue. The explanation is the upper classes have been waging unrelenting class warfare on the rest of the population. And this has happened under Clinton, under certainly under Reagan, under Bush 1, Bush 2, and now again under Obama. It is part of a pattern of eviscerating the great bulk of the population. I spend a lot of time in India, and you cannot compare poverty in the United States with poverty in India or in Pakistan or Nepal and some of these other countries I visit on a fairly regular basis. Nevertheless, the income and wealth gap has widened enormously in the United States over the last 20 years. And again, when you're desperate, you start doing desperate things, like, you know, going out and buying these subprime mortgages, listening to hucksters from Wall Street promising you the moon, you know, hoping that, you know, this will give you the break, this will get you to first base, you know, because you've been stuck at home plate and unable to move, looking for some kind of remedy. And so that bulk of the population is very vulnerable to the hucksters, to the charlatans who have come out of Wall Street. You know, literally, these people were going to 7-Eleven in the middle of the night asking people there, do you want to buy a house? Do you want to own a house? I've got a deal for you. I mean, that's how depraved it became, this whole you know, financial boondoggle. And of course, when the corporate media reports about it, it's always about individuals who are bad apples. They mess up things. Gee, you know, if only we didn't have Bernie Madoff, it's a great economic system. Yeah, sure, you know, here and there are a couple of, you know, these rotten apples, but the barrel's great. Don't even talk about the barrel. Why can't we talk about the barrel? Because then we're talking about capitalism. Why can't we talk about U.S. foreign policy in a way I think it should be talked about? Because that means talking about imperialism. Oh, we can't talk about imperialism. That's a no-no. We can talk about British imperialism 50, 60 years ago, French imperialism, the Greeks, the Romans, the Dutch, the Spanish, the Belgium. That's all legitimate. But you cannot attach the adjective American in front of the noun imperialism. That is a no-go area. And except for perhaps alternative radio, a few other audio outlets, a few magazines like Z and others, people do not talk about it, even on the left. It's not discussed in a way that I think is absolutely required. We cannot change the system if we do not identify it with the correct vocabulary. And so this goes to one of the earliest interviews I've ever been privileged to do. Excuse me. And I mentioned it on an interview earlier today on KLCC, an interview I did with Confucius. Cosmetic surgery has a lot going on. You know, I'm a lot older than I look. I decided to interview Confucius some time ago. Sent him a letter. You know, in those days, this is a very young audience. You don't remember, there used to be stamps and envelopes and letters, and he would write addresses with return addresses. And so I wrote, and he wrote back. You know, it took months. It was going by sea mail. There were no planes in those days. And I said, Mr. Confucius, I'd love to have an interview with you. And finally, you know, he relented and said, okay, come on over. So I got a ship there from, actually from Florence, from the port of Florence. Yes, a schooner. Went over to China and got my audience with Confucius. But when I got there, I was really discombobulated because he had changed his mind. He said, look, David, you see, I am a man of contemplation. I'm interested in philosophy, yin and yang, how the world works, what is the meaning of life, how to promote tranquility among the people. I'm not interested in these kind of political questions that you're asking. So I persisted, I said, please, I came, I used all my frequent flyer miles, frequent seafaring miles to come over here. I can't go back empty-handed. Please, at least one question, answer one question. And he said, okay, one question. What is your question? I said, my question, Mr. Confucius, is, if you were the ruler of the realm, what would you do? Well, he laughed. He said, look, I'm not interested in having power. I'm a man of contemplation. I said, yeah, I know, you told me that. Let's pretend that you are the ruler of the world, of the realm. What would you do? What one thing would you do? And he answered, rectify the language. Because when language is corrupted, then thought is corrupted. And political leaders and the media can control what people think, what their perspective, how they view the world can be manufactured and fabricated. Rectify the language. So what I'm going to do now actually is go over a few words for you. And none of this is,